I never thought I'd start my engagement party with a slap to the face from my own father. My name is Emily Westwood, and I was 28 when my dream celebration in Santa Barbara turned into a nightmare. I'd spent 5 years saving over $50,000 for my wedding. Every penny earned from cleaning kennels, late night waitressing, and pet sitting on weekends. And yet, in one humiliating moment, all of that was nearly stolen from me by my own family. It started with a whisper. My mom had been calling more often than usual, asking how Brandon was such a burdened soul, how life was unfair to dreamers. I should have known it was a setup. Brandon, my older brother, had burned through tens of thousands with gambling, failed apps, pyramid schemes, and now, apparently, owed money to dangerous people. I brushed off her comments, focusing instead on planning the celebration Daniel and I had envisioned for years. The ocean breeze, the garden lights, my vintage ivory dress. I wanted it to be perfect. And for a moment, it was. Until Dad pulled me aside, cornered me behind the hydrangeas, and demanded I write a check for the full $50,000. Family comes first, he said. Brandon needs you. When I refused. Heart pounding, voice steady. His hand flew. The sound of the slap echoed louder than the music. Guests froze. My fiancé ran to me. And in that instant, something inside me broke. Not from pain, but from clarity. That slap didn't come from a place of love. It came from entitlement. To every woman who's ever been guilted into giving more than she could afford, to every daughter who had to be the responsible one while others made mistake after mistake. You are not alone. If this story resonates with you, drop a comment below. I want to hear your story. Like and subscribe, because it's time women like us stop suffering in silence. Growing up, I thought my family was just like everyone else's. My dad, Paul Westwood, was a respected local attorney in Scottsdale, Arizona. My mom, Grace, ran the home and volunteered at church. And then there was Brandon, 4 years older, effortlessly charming, and the apple of my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was the good girl. I followed the rules, got straight A's, took AP classes, and worked part-time from age 15. But none of that earned me the kind of praise Brandon got just for showing up. He crashed 2 cars. He's under stress. He dropped out of college. He's figuring things out. He racked up thousands in credit card debt. He's a dreamer, not a saver. I couldn't remember a single family dinner that didn't revolve around Brandon's latest idea. From screenwriting to flipping houses to day trading, and each time, my parents eagerly opened their wallets. Meanwhile, when I told them I'd gotten into UCLA on scholarship, Dad's response was, "You sure you want to move that far away? It's not like you need a fancy degree to be a wife someday." That comment stuck with me for years. So, I carved my own way. I rented a studio with peeling paint and worked late night shifts while studying for my degree in animal science. I cooked ramen on a hot plate and wore thrifted shoes to interviews. My parents didn't help with tuition. They didn't ask about my internships. But when Brandon's startup flopped, again, they drained part of their retirement account to cover his debts. I said nothing, because that's what the responsible one does, until Daniel came into my life. He was different. He didn't interrupt me when I talked. He listened when I vented about my family, never minimizing what I felt. He never once suggested I loan money I couldn't afford to lose. And when I told him about the wedding fund I'd been growing since college, he didn't laugh. He was moved. "We'll build our life together," he said, on your terms. But as we got closer to our engagement party, I noticed a change. My mom would call just to chat, but always slipped in something like, "Brandon's been so anxious lately." Or, "Did you know he's being harassed by collectors?" She didn't ask about our wedding plans. She asked how secure my savings were. I should have seen it coming. They had protected Brandon his entire life, even when it hurt everyone else. Even when it meant lying, manipulating, and shaming their own daughter. Looking back, the slap wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. A line being drawn. The golden child had failed. And this time, I refused to foot the bill. The truth is, I started saving for my wedding long before I ever met Daniel. It wasn't about the flowers or the dress. It was about control. About security. About building something that no one could take from me. Not Brandon, not my parents, not the chaos I grew up in. At 18, while my friends were shopping for dorm supplies, I was working triple shifts. Mornings at a vet clinic, afternoons shelving books at the campus library, and weekends walking dogs in the neighborhood. Every dollar I earned went into a separate savings account labeled, "You two are." While my brother crashed on couches and ranted about vision. I learned to cook with bulk rice and frozen veggies. I drove a '98 Corolla with a cracked windshield for 7 years. And I tracked every single cent I spent. My classmates joked that I was Emily the accountant. I didn't care. Because that fund represented freedom. By the time I graduated college, I had just over $112,000. I skipped spring breaks, birthday parties, and trendy brunches. I packed peanut butter sandwiches and brought my own coffee in a thermos. By 25, I had crossed 30,000. By 28, I had 50,000. Half was earmarked for the wedding I dreamed of. Not flashy, but intentional. A garden venue, a live string quartet, gourmet tacos under the stars, and the people who truly loved me. The other half would be for a down payment on a modest home. Then I met Daniel. He was kind in a way that disarmed me. Not performative kindness, but real, consistent decency. He remembered little things. How I liked my coffee, how crowds overwhelmed me, how I felt invisible at family dinners. He was a high school math teacher who had also worked his way through school. Our values aligned effortlessly. When I told him about my wedding fund, I expected the same reaction most guys had. Some mix of awkwardness and discomfort. But he said, "That's incredible. I hope I get to be the one standing next to you when you spend it." For the first time, I felt seen. We moved in together after a year, splitting rent, utilities, and groceries down the middle. Daniel insisted on contributing to the wedding fund. "We're a team," he said. "This is our dream now." It felt right, so when we got engaged, we booked a garden venue in Santa Barbara. The Seaside Grove. It had winding paths lined with lavender, a stone courtyard for dancing, and an old wooden arch overlooking the ocean. I paid the deposit. We picked a date for October. Everything was falling into place. But Brandon's world was crumbling. Again. His latest venture, a crypto rewards app for local diners, yes really, had tanked. Apparently, he owed nearly $60,000 to some private lenders in Las Vegas. And suddenly, my mother was calling daily. First, it was about the weather. Then about the food for our party. Then, subtly, about how tight things were, and how hard it must be to carry financial pressure alone. I didn't respond, until she finally said it. "You know, your father and I were thinking. Maybe just for a while, you could help Brandon out. You're so responsible, sweetie. So smart. He's drowning." I asked her, flat out, Are you asking for my wedding fund? She sighed. Well, it's just money. You and Daniel have love. Brandon has nothing. I hung up. The old Emily would have cried. Maybe even considered it. But not this time. I wasn't a bank. I wasn't a band aid for Brandon's self-inflicted wounds. I was a woman who had sacrificed comfort, luxury, and social life for years to build a dream. And I wasn't giving it away. Daniel supported me completely. They don't get to rewrite the rules just because you followed them, he said. Still, I knew something was brewing. My parents RSVP'd late to the engagement party. Brandon didn't even bother to text, "Congrats." But I refused to let them ruin this. I wore my favorite ivory dress. I arrived early to the seaside grove and helped the caterers hang lights and arrange hydrangeas. I hugged Daniel's parents like they were already family. I danced with my college friends and laughed until my stomach hurt. For one perfect hour, I forgot what was coming. Then my dad grabbed my arm, and everything changed. From the first time I met Daniel, I felt like I could finally exhale. He was gentle, not in a weak way, but in a way that made space for me to exist fully. He wasn't intimidated by my independence. He didn't treat my ambition like a threat. He saw it as a strength. We met during a volunteer event at a local animal shelter. He was walking dogs, I was helping clean cages. He struck up a conversation about the playlist the staff had going. 90s R&B, our shared soft spot. Our first date was a hike, followed by street tacos and hours of talking about everything from our worst jobs to our favorite books. He didn't talk over me. He didn't brag. He listened. When I told him I was building a wedding fund, someday, hopefully, he didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "That's the smartest thing I've ever heard. Most people spend years trying to undo bad financial decisions. You're building a future on purpose." His words didn't feel like flattery. They felt like home. By the time we got serious, we'd had dozens of those heart-to-heart talks. About money. About boundaries. About family. I told him I didn't want to inherit dysfunction just because it came wrapped in a bloodline. He nodded and said, "We don't owe anyone access to our peace." We moved in together after a year and a half, and it wasn't long before we both knew we wanted to spend our lives together. The proposal wasn't flashy. It was a quiet Saturday morning. He brought me coffee in bed, sat down beside me, and pulled out a simple velvet box. "I want to build everything with you," he said. "The life, the home, the family, on your terms and mine, not anyone else's." I said yes before he could finish. We planned our engagement party with care. Daniel's parents, Margaret and Bill, were flying in from Oregon. They were warm, loving people who brought homemade jam and handwritten notes. They treated me like family from day one. My own family, on the other hand, distant. My mom sent passive-aggressive texts about how over the top the venue looked. My dad made one cryptic comment about how no wedding is worth 50 grand. Unless someone's buying a private island. Brandon didn't reach out at all. I tried not to let it bother me. The seaside grove was breathtaking that day. Golden light filtered through the sycamore trees. The scent of rosemary and ocean air drifted across the lawn. The garden was dressed in soft white lights. Our favorite indie songs played softly in the background. I wore a sleeveless ivory gown with lace detailing. Daniel wore navy, with a pocket square to match the eucalyptus in my bouquet. We greeted guests, took Polaroids, and toasted with sparkling cider. It was everything I'd dreamed: intimate, joyful, full of the people who actually showed up for us. Then, they arrived. My parents and Brandon. 45 minutes late. My dad wore a stiff suit and a stiff expression. My mom clutched her purse like a lifeline. Brandon looked like he'd been dragged there. Rumpled shirt, eyes darting around like he was waiting for something. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom said, hugging me without really hugging me. This must have cost a fortune. I just smiled and led them to the bar. For the next hour, they floated from one guest to another, never settling, never smiling. Brandon stood alone, glancing at his phone, avoiding eye contact. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Something was coming. Daniel tried to distract me. "Let's sneak away for a bit," he whispered, guiding me toward the rose garden. But we didn't make it far. My dad appeared out of nowhere and took my arm with surprising force. "We need to talk," he said through clenched teeth. I glanced around. Everyone was laughing, clinking glasses, completely unaware. He steered me behind a row of hedges. My mom and Brandon followed. "Brandon's in trouble," my dad started. I folded my arms. Not my problem. "This isn't a joke, Emily," my mom said, tears already forming. "He owes people money, dangerous people." My heart pounded. "Let me guess," I said. "You want the wedding fund?" They didn't even pretend to deny it. "You can postpone the wedding," Dad said. "Have something simple. You and Daniel love each other, that's what matters, right?" Brandon finally spoke. "I'll pay you back." I laughed bitterly. "You've never paid anyone back in your life. You don't understand who I owe," he snapped. "Then call the cops," I said. "Or better yet, take responsibility." My dad's face flushed with rage. "If you don't write him a check tonight, this engagement is off." I stared at him. "You don't get to decide that. You selfish little girl." He spat. And then it happened. His hand rose. And fell. The slap echoed through the air. For a second, everything went silent. Then I heard gasps. A glass shattered. Somewhere behind me, Daniel shouted my name. My cheek burned, my eyes blurred. But I stood my ground. "You just made this really easy," I said quietly. In the seconds after the slap, everything blurred. I wasn't just stunned by the pain. I was stunned by the audacity. The entitlement. The belief that they had the right to my money. My moment, my life. I touched my cheek. It was already hot and swelling. I looked my father in the eyes. "You will never speak to me like that again," I said. "You sure as hell won't touch me." By then, Daniel had reached us. He stood between me and my father like a wall. His fists were clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "Sir, you need to leave, now." My father scoffed. "This is family business." "No," Daniel said. "This is abuse." Other guests began to gather. Someone gasped. I saw my college roommate pull out her phone. My aunt stepped forward in shock. Brandon looked like he wanted to disappear. Still, my mother said nothing. She just stood there, dabbing at her eyes, whispering. "He didn't mean it." I turned to her. "You always say that. But he always does it anyway." My father was fuming. "You ungrateful little. After all we've done for you. All you've done is lie," I snapped. "Lie and guilt and drain. And I'm done." I walked away. Right there, in my cocktail dress and heels, I pulled out my phone and dialed 9911. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Mine was steady. "Yes, I'd like to report an assault." My father hit me. "We're at the Seaside Grove. There are over 70 witnesses." I hung up and turned back toward the garden. Guests were still frozen, murmuring, unsure what to do. Daniel took my hand. "We'll get through this," he said. "I've got you." And I believed him. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed outside the venue. The police arrived. 2 officers, 1 female, 1 male. They separated us and took statements. My roommate handed over her video recording. Clear audio. Clear slap. My father tried to argue. It was just a tap. She's exaggerating. She was provoking me. My mother nodded weakly. She pushed him. But the officer raised her hand. "Sir, she's 28 years old. You struck another adult. That's assault." I pointed toward the security cameras. "There's footage too. The venue has everything." My father's face dropped. They took him into custody. He screamed as they cuffed him. "You're destroying this family!" "Over money," I shouted back. "It's not about money. It's about respect. Something you've never shown me." The car doors slammed. Silence fell. I stood in the courtyard, shaking. And then, quietly, Daniel whispered, "Let's go get some ice for your cheek." The rest of the night unraveled fast. My mother cried and clung to Brandon. He looked numb. The caterers kept serving whores. Do-overs like nothing had happened. Some guests left. Others came to hug me. One elderly neighbor whispered, "You're the bravest woman I've ever met." Later that night, Daniel and I sat on the edge of our bed, holding hands in silence. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I felt hollow and hyper-aware, like my body was still stuck back in the garden while my brain raced ahead. My phone buzzed a message from my mother. "Please drop the charges." He didn't mean it. "We need you. Brandon needs you." I blocked the number. The next day, a detective called. Turns out the investigation had uncovered something worse. My father wasn't just covering Brandon's debt. He'd been involved in illegal gambling operations. He'd borrowed tens of thousands under false pretenses. Sometimes using my name. He told my aunt he needed money for my grad school tuition. I never went to grad school. He told my cousin I needed car repairs. I'd never even spoken to her about my car. Over the years, he'd stolen almost $40,000 using my name. That was the moment the betrayal hit hardest. Not the slap. Not the public humiliation. But the slow erosion of trust that had been happening behind the scenes for years, while I was out in the world trying to be responsible and build a future. He was ruining my name, behind my back. When I told Daniel, he held me for a long time. "What do I do now?" I asked. He looked at me, eyes steady. "You heal. You protect yourself. You build new boundaries." That night, I made a decision. No more financial discussions with my family. No more guilt. No more phone calls. I started looking for a trauma therapist. I contacted each relative my dad had scammed and told them the truth. Most of them were kind. "You don't have to apologize," my aunt said. "He used your name, not your character. We know who you are." I wept. Because for the first time, I believed them. The days following my engagement party felt like living in the wreckage of a house I never realized was burning. I kept expecting to wake up and find it had all been a bad dream, the slap, the sirens, the handcuffs. But it was all real. So real that the echo of it played on a loop in my mind whenever I closed my eyes. 3 days after the party, the detective investigating my father's case called me again. "We're widening the inquiry," she said. "There's a pattern here. It turns out, the dangerous people Brandon owed money to weren't just loan sharks. They were part of an illegal gambling ring, and my father had been both a client and a recruiter. he wasn't just helping Brandon. He was funneling money through his own clients, even using Brandon's fake business ventures as cover for laundering. But what shook me most was how deep the betrayal ran. I found out my father had borrowed 15,000 from my Aunt Linda, claiming it was to help me with medical bills from a car accident I never had. Another 8,000 from my godfather, supposedly to help me finish grad school. $3,000 from my cousin Vanessa, because I'd allegedly had my identity stolen and needed help covering rent. None of it was true. Each relative thought they were saving me. And I hadn't even known they'd helped. No wonder they'd seemed so distant in recent years. They thought I was ungrateful. They thought I was taking without thanks. They didn't know I was just being used. Again. I spent hours calling each of them, explaining what had happened. Some cried. Some were stunned into silence. One aunt even apologized to me, saying, "I thought you were selfish. Turns out, your father was the one wearing the mask." That night, I sat with Daniel on our couch and finally let myself break down. I've spent my whole life trying to earn their approval. I sobbed. And all along, they were using my name to cover up their lies. Daniel didn't offer platitudes. He didn't rush to fix it. He just held me while I cried. That's what love looks like. Not what my family had taught me. A week later, I got another knock on the emotional door I was trying to keep shut. Brandon showed up at my apartment. He looked exhausted. Unshaven. Nervous. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in, but kept my arms crossed. "I'm not here to fight," he said. I screwed up. Bad. Dad's in jail. Mom's a wreck. And I'm getting calls from guys who aren't polite about what I owe." My instinct was to feel sorry. That's the role I've always played. The fixer, the comforter, the steady one. But this time, I stopped myself. "I'm not giving you money, Brandon," I said flatly. "Not a cent." He looked down. "I know. I'm not even asking for that anymore. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." It took me a second to register those words. I'd never heard them from him before. Ever. "I've been a terrible brother," he went on. "I was always the problem, and somehow you were the one cleaning up my mess. You didn't deserve that." It wasn't a full redemption, but it was a crack in the wall. That week, I started therapy with Dr. Helen Simmons, a psychologist specializing in family trauma. I didn't even know how to begin. So I just laid it all out: the slap, the manipulation, the years of emotional gaslighting disguised as tradition. Dr. Simmons listened without judgment. "What you're describing," she said gently, "is a dysfunctional family system, one where roles are rigid. Your father the enforcer, your mother the enabler, your brother the taker, and you the fixer." I nodded, tears pooling in my eyes. I thought it was just how families worked. "No," she said. "That's how your family worked, not how healthy families work." We began unpacking every moment that now looked different in hindsight. The birthday, I got a sweater while Brandon got a new car. The time my dad borrowed my $600 tax refund when I was 16 and never returned it. The way they laughed at my thriftiness but begged for money when Brandon was in trouble. It all made sense now. And it hurt. Meanwhile, Daniel stood by me like a lighthouse through fog. His parents sent a bouquet of sunflowers every week. My college friends took turns checking in. I was building something I never had growing up. A support system based on truth, not guilt. Then came the next big decision: the wedding. I had always dreamed of a garden wedding with 100 guests. A taco truck. a jazz trio, and a sparkler send-off. But now, even thinking about walking down the aisle made my stomach clench. I can't do it. I told Daniel one night. Not like we planned. He nodded without hesitation. Then let's do something else, something just for us. We decided to scale everything back. A small ceremony with 30 people at a nearby botanical garden. Simple, sweet, surrounded only by those who truly supported us. We'd use part of the wedding fund for a down payment on a house, another part for continued therapy, and the rest for a short, quiet honeymoon. We weren't running away from the past. We were walking forward, hand in hand, into something we'd built ourselves. My mother, still clinging to denial, texted regularly. Sometimes she asked for updates. Sometimes she guilted me about dropping the assault charges. I kept my replies minimal and firm. I owed her boundaries, not explanations. And then, 2 months later, my father took a plea deal, 18 months in a minimum security facility for financial crimes. Probation for the assault. Mandatory counseling and restitution to the relatives he defrauded. My mother called me sobbing. Will you at least come say goodbye before he reports to prison? I hesitated. I brought it to Dr. Simmons. I think I need closure, I told her, so I went. The house looked smaller than I remembered. My father looked older. Tired. Defeated. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He didn't ask how I was. He just muttered, "It shouldn't have gone this far." I stood tall. It didn't have to. But you chose this? As Daniel and I walked out, my mother grabbed my hand. He really is sorry, she whispered. He just doesn't know how to say it. I looked her in the eye. Then he needs to learn. The more the truth unraveled, the more I realized I hadn't just lost my father. I had lost the entire illusion of the family I thought I had. What started with a slap became the opening crack in a dam of secrets no one expected to burst. After the plea deal, the financial crimes investigation didn't stop. In fact, it picked up speed. Federal agents traced my father's transactions across multiple accounts, fake LLCs, and dead-end investments. Brandon's so-called businesses turned out to be fronts. Poorly constructed, but perfect for money laundering. He hadn't just been the innocent screw-up anymore. He was complicit. Though he wasn't arrested, Brandon was called in repeatedly for interviews. And with each session, I imagined the version of him I used to defend, being slowly peeled away. Dr. Simmons warned me. This part is always hard. You'll start questioning every childhood memory, every compliment, every "I love you." That's the grief of truth. And she was right. I began journaling nightly, revisiting moments from my youth that once seemed normal but now screamed dysfunction. Like when I got accepted into UCLA and my dad said, "Poor." Or the time I saved up for a class ring and mom borrowed the money to cover Brandon's bail after a bar fight. Even Christmases, Brandon unwrapping expensive gifts while I got practical things like socks or notebooks. Because you're not materialistic, they said. I believed them. Now, I saw it for what it was: favoritism, wrapped in gaslighting. One night, Daniel and I sat on the floor of our new apartment, the one we'd gotten with part of my original wedding fund, and he asked, "Do you ever regret not just giving them the money?" I thought for a moment. If I had, it wouldn't have ended there. It never ends. They'd come for more, and I'd still be the girl who flinches every time she gets a "can we talk" text. He nodded. I just wish you hadn't had to go through all of this. But I had to? I said. Because now, I finally see it clearly, and I'm not scared anymore. In therapy, I'd started writing boundary letters. Unsent letters expressing what I never got to say to each family member. It helped more than I expected. To my dad. You raised me to be afraid of disappointing you. But you never tried not to disappoint me. To my mom. Love doesn't mean covering up crimes. Love means protecting your child. You never protected me. To Brandon. You didn't fail because you dreamed too big. You failed because you never tried responsibly. And I'm done paying for that. But the most important letter I wrote was to myself. I forgive you for not seeing it sooner, for trying too hard, for always thinking if you were just a little more helpful, a little more patient, maybe they'd finally love you the way you deserved. It was that letter that made me cry the hardest. Meanwhile, Brandon was unraveling. He moved out of his expensive apartment and into a studio above a mechanic's shop. His so-called friends disappeared. Mom stopped taking his calls when she finally realized she had no more money to offer. He came to see me one last time. He looked thinner, tired, humble in a way that almost didn't feel real. I'm going to therapy, he said. Court-ordered, but it's helping. I nodded. Good. I hope you keep at it. He looked around my apartment. You made a nice life, Em. Without all the handouts. That meant something. It really did. But I didn't let it open the door back up. Not yet. At our reimagined wedding. Just 30 guests in a serene garden. Brandon wasn't there. He'd declined the invitation himself, saying, I think I'd only bring bad energy. And you deserve better. It was, oddly, the most mature thing he'd ever done. The ceremony was perfect. Simple, authentic, no drama, no manipulation. Just laughter, honest vows, and real love. Michael's mom cried during our first dance. My Aunt Linda, now fully back in my life, gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry at once. Even my mom attended. Quiet, reserved, but present. She'd been coming to family therapy sessions with me and Dr. Simmons. Progress was slow, but it was something. My father sent a letter through her. Congratulations. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I'm getting help. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. Forgiveness is a choice. One I wasn't ready for yet, and I wasn't going to rush it just because he finally said something halfway decent. Instead, I focused on the people who were there, the ones who had held me, fed me, called me, and reminded me that I wasn't crazy. People who had seen the worst day of my life, caught on video, echoed through sirens, and still chose to love me. And Daniel. Always Daniel. That night, as we danced under twinkle lights, I whispered, "Thank you for choosing me, even when my world was a disaster." He kissed my forehead. You were never the disaster. Just caught in one. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a slow, uneven climb filled with setbacks, doubts, and unexpected waves of grief. Some mornings I'd wake up grateful. Grateful for the boundaries, for Daniel, for the peace I was building. Other days, I'd spiral into shame. Not because I stood up for myself, but because I hadn't done it sooner. Dr. Simmons told me that was normal. You grew up in a system that punished boundaries. Of course it feels unnatural to set them now, but that discomfort isn't a sign that you're wrong. It's proof you're changing. I clung to that truth. My mother continued reaching out. Her texts shifted, from guilt to vague attempts at connection. I saw this soup recipe and thought of you. I'm organizing old photos. You were so cute in your third grade picture. It wasn't apology, but it was effort. I responded politely, never warmly. Never with open doors. Just safe, polite walls. That was my boundary. Brandon stayed quiet for a while. Until one evening he called, his voice subdued. "I've been clean for 6 months," he said. "Working as a barback. Not glamorous, but I'm paying my own rent." "That's good," I said carefully. "I don't expect anything from you," he added quickly. "I just wanted to say you were right. About everything." He didn't ask for money. Or favors. Just forgiveness. And that felt like progress too. Daniel and I settled into our new home. Nothing fancy, a 2-bedroom fixer, upper with peeling paint and a tiny backyard. But it was ours. Bought with savings I refused to sacrifice for guilt. We painted the kitchen sunflower yellow. Planted herbs by the window. We laughed at ourselves while assembling furniture wrong, then right. It wasn't the wedding I once imagined. But it was the life I always deserved. I joined a local women's support group. Women who, like me, had grown up as the strong one. The fixer. The one who held everyone together until she broke. I shared my story. They shared theirs. One woman whispered, "I've never said that out loud before." And suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. The wedding video still sat in my drawer. Footage from the engagement party, including the slap, captured in brutal clarity. I hadn't watched it. Not yet. But I didn't delete it either. Because that moment, awful as it was, marked the beginning of my real life. It was the day I finally said no. And meant it. The day I stopped being their safety net and started being my own safety. And in the quiet moments, when Daniel made me tea, or when the garden bloomed in spring, I felt something I'd never truly known in my childhood home. Peace. I used to believe my mother was a victim, just like me. That she was simply swept along in my father's wake, silenced by tradition and obligation. But the deeper I examined the truth, the harder it became to keep seeing her that way. Because silence is a choice too. She was there through every manipulation. She handed over the money. She nodded when my father made excuses. She looked away when I was left out, overlooked, sacrificed. And worst of all, she stood beside him the night he hit me. She didn't stop him. She didn't pull him back. She didn't even look shocked. She just cried and said, "He didn't mean it." But he did mean it. And so did she. During therapy, Dr. Simmons said something that stuck with me. "Oh, enablers don't have to raise their voices or their hands to cause damage. They just have to refuse to say no." My mother never said no to him. She never protected me. Not once. When I finally confronted her during one of our therapy sessions, I said, "You watched it happen. You heard what he said. Why didn't you stop him?" She looked down. I was scared. I didn't say anything at first. Then finally, I replied, "So was I. And I was the one getting hit." That session changed everything. She started taking real accountability. Not just with me, but with herself. She began therapy on her own. She wrote letters to every relative my father defrauded, apologizing and owning her role in it. She even apologized for the slap, for her silence, for not being the mother I needed. It didn't undo the damage, but it was a beginning. She came to my wedding alone. She wore a simple dress and brought a small photo of my grandmother as a gift. During our mother-daughter dance, she whispered, "I'm proud of you, and I'm learning from you." For the first time, I believed her, because maybe the most radical thing we can do in a broken family isn't scream or beg. It's break the cycle. And that starts with truth. Looking back now, I don't see the slap as the worst moment of my life. I see it as the turning point, because that night didn't just shatter the illusion of family. It revealed the truth hiding behind it. And that truth set me free. Free from guilt that was never mine. Free from roles I never chose. Free to build a new kind of family. One built not on blood, but on boundaries, respect, and love. I no longer bend over backwards to keep the peace. I no longer feel obligated to sacrifice for people who only call when they need something. And I no longer mistake silence for kindness. Today, I live in a small home filled with laughter and healing. My husband and I dance in the kitchen, dream about the future, and check in on each other after hard days. We've built something honest. Something real. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table, just because they share your last name. That's a hard truth, but an empowering one. To every woman watching who's been told she's selfish for setting boundaries. To every daughter who gave more than she got. To every sister who was expected to clean up someone else's mess. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone your savings. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they say, family. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever stood up to family pressure and paid the price, leave a comment below. I want to hear your story. And if you're still in that cycle, wondering if you're wrong for saying no, you're not. You're brave. You're breaking something toxic so something better can grow. Please like this video. Subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because healing starts when we speak the truth out loud.